Hello, neighbors and friends and fellow Bible students. This video is about the Temple Mount. Now, those of you who are familiar with Bible and end-time prophecies have surely noticed the events in the daily news, and you can tell that according to what the Bible says, it looks like we are in the last days. Terrible natural events, a rise in demonic activities, bizarre, unnatural sexual practices, compromise in the church, a tsunami of perversion and lust, and more wars than we can keep up with. So I believe the next thing that will gain a massive amount of attention in the world, and especially among believers, is the building of a third temple on the Temple Mount. The Jews are back in their homeland, and the temple they have been praying for since 70 AD is foremost in their minds. And we know from the Bible that there will be a third temple built in the last days. We also know that the Antichrist will desecrate that temple and proclaim himself as God in that very temple. Now, does this mean that the third temple is an Antichrist temple, which I hear often? And no, it does not, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. There's always been one big problem when it comes to talking about building the temple, and that is the Dome of the Rock. Now, many believe that the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim place of worship, is built exactly where the last temple stood. And the only way to build a new temple is to destroy the Dome of the Rock. And we know that would bring about World War III. But I'd like to propose maybe the original temple location is not under the Dome of the Rock. Now that would make things a lot easier, wouldn't it? And I've researched this before. It was probably, 7 or 8 years ago. I researched it quite a bit. And there's a lot of publicity over the theory that the temple is actually in the city of David. And I do not believe that is true. I watched all of the videos, I read the documents that supposedly support this, and I do not believe that the temple was in the city of David. My hair thing is driving me crazy. Give me a second. It's freshly washed and going crazy. But this theory is extremely popular, but I don't agree with it. So I believe, and this is just my opinion, that the original location of the temple is right next to the Dome of the Rock. They'd be sitting side by side. And I'm going to show you multiple reasons why I believe this. And in the description below the video, I'll provide a link to a very thorough research on this subject. So we're going to be talking about a couple of Bible passages that may sound like this is true. We're going to talk about the threshing floor that David purchased that is supposed to be under the temple. We're going to talk about the Eastern Gate and why it's very important in finding the original temple location. We're going to look at history and what it says about the Dome of the Rock, and how the Temple Institute has everything prepared for the new temple. And then the last thing is, should Christians support the building of or encourage the building of the temple? So first we're just going to look at a few passages, and I know that sounded like a lot, but I'm going to cover it quick. So we're going to read in Ezekiel 43. And this is God talking to Ezekiel about a future temple. And he said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell among the sons of Israel forever. And the house of Israel will not again defile my name, they nor their kings, by their harlotry and by the corpses of their kings when they die, by setting their threshold by my threshold, and their doorpost beside my doorpost, with only a wall between them. So God is obviously speaking of a temple mount in this passage, speaking of a future temple. And it sounds like there will be two buildings setting their threshold by my threshold. And a threshold is the place before the door. Their doorpost beside my doorpost. Then he mentions corpses of their kings. And in actuality, there is an Islamic king buried on the Temple Mount. His name is, and I may not get this right, Hussein Ali al-Hashimi. He was buried in 1931 near the gate of the cotton merchants. So on the Temple Mount is buried an Islamic king, just like it talks about in Ezekiel 43. Another indication in Scripture of a future temple only occupying a limited portion of the Temple Mount is found in Revelations 11, verses 1 and 2. And it says, "Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, 'Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside of the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months.'" So evidently, at a future time, the Temple Mount will consist of God's temple on part of the Temple Mount, and another part of the Temple Mount will be controlled by someone who is not God's people. This could very easily be a Jewish temple and the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount Plateau. So let's look at some things that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about the location of the temple. And the very first thing we have to look at is the threshing floor. In Genesis 22, David had purchased, that's Abraham. David had purchased a threshing floor from Araunah the Jebusite, I probably didn't pronounce that right, and built an altar there to worship God, there on Mount Moriah. In Genesis 22, Mount Moriah is also where Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. Abraham called it the mountain of the Lord. And this same mountain is where Solomon builds the temple for the Lord. In 2 Chronicles 3 and 1, it says, the temple for the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father. So we know that Solomon's temple was built exactly on the threshing floor purchased by David. Now, in case you didn't know, a threshing floor is a flat, hard place to separate grain from the stalks. Now, I do want to tell you, I'm not reading a book. I'm looking at my notes that are typed up on the screen. So all of these things that I teach, I write the content myself. So I'm just reading my notes. And I'm not seeing very clearly through these glasses. So I'll say this again. We know that Solomon's temple was built exactly on the threshing floor, purchased by David. And it says that in 2 Chronicles 3 and 1. Now here is a huge problem. There is a large rock inside the Dome of the Rock, and it is not flat. A threshing floor is flat and hard. They did use ground that was packed down real hard, but the ideal place was a piece of bedrock that would be a cleaner surface. So under the Dome of the Rock, and I meant to show you a picture, but you can just Google Dome of the Rock image, and you can see what it looks like. It's like a little mountaintop. And the Muslims venerate this rock because they say that Muhammad ascended to heaven from there. But if you look at a picture of that rock, it doesn't even remotely resemble a flat threshing floor. Now, some will say it used to be flat, but people chipped off so much of it that it kind of turned it into look like a mountain. Well, it is a mountain. It is part of the mountaintop of Moriah. And if you just do a little research, you'll deduce that that theory is most likely not plausible. But there is a flat piece of bedrock on the Temple Mount, a little right next to the Dome of the Rock and a little further north. It shows all the signs of being an ancient threshing floor. It is a flat piece of bedrock that is pitted. It's about a 10-foot circle or square, and it's obvious that the Temple Mount Plateau, built by Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian, was leveled off with this hard pitted surface. And another thing that is strange about it is that it is treated as a special place, but no one seems to know why. There are 4 columns around it, and there's a small dome built over it. Now, older Islamic historical documents state that Jews used to come there and lay on their faces and weep at this small, flat piece of bedrock. Now, I wonder why that would be. Okay, let's look at some other evidence. And this is about the Eastern Gate. And in the source I'm going to give you, there is 10 years worth of research behind all of the things that I'm talking about with you. So we're going to look at the Eastern Gate now, and it ties in with the threshing floor. Rabbinical literature tells us that the Eastern Gate is directly in front of the temple doors. This is all through rabbinical literature. But the problem is that the Eastern Gate is not in line with the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock sits, if you're standing at the Eastern Gate and looking towards the west, the Dome of the Rock is over here. And if it is where the temple is, it should be right in front of the Eastern Gate. Well, they say that it's not in line with the Dome of the Rock because they're pretty sure that Suleiman the Great must have moved that gate when he rebuilt the temple walls during his reign. The problem is there is archaeological evidence beneath that Eastern Gate. Actually, an archaeologist, there are graves all along the side of the eastern wall there, and that's because of the prophecy that Jesus, a king, would return and come through that Eastern Gate. So they blocked it up so he couldn't get back in. And then they buried bodies all in front of it because they knew that the Jews would not desecrate that area, that they would not traipse over those dead bodies. But there was an archaeologist there looking around, and one of the tombs had caved in, and he fell down in there. And he sees the foundations of the Eastern Gate down there. And now it's blocked off. Nobody can get in there. But there's lots of other proof. This is the same Eastern Gate that has always been there. And the Dome of the Rock is not in front of it. So, I wonder what is right in front of it. Well, it's David's threshing floor. Remember the one with the columns and the dome over it? It's now called the Dome of the Spirits, and it exactly lines up with the Eastern Gate. Imagine that. Now, there's been a lot of research done. Nobody really knows what's so special about the Dome of the Spirits or why that dome was put there. But then, as we just talked about, ancient Islamic documents said Jews used to come there and weep before that rock. And it's believed that the threshing floor is where the Holy of Holies sat. So if you put a new Jewish temple on that spot, and the Holy of Holies is right over that threshing floor. And as the temple comes forward, it was long like that. It exactly matches up side by side with the Dome of the Rock. Just imagine the implications if this is true. That means they don't have to start World War III to build a new Jewish temple. Now, the Dome of the Rock, the earliest Muslim records related to the Temple Mount say nothing about building over the Jewish temple site. They are solely focused on the actions of Muhammad, because they believe that that rock is where Muhammad stood and ascended up into heaven, or wherever it is he went. In the 14th century, I can't see his first name because my autocorrect changed his name to Mother. His last name was Al-Gharam, G-H-I-R-A-M, and he's a Muslim. He suggested that the temple location was actually believed in those days to be north of the rock, which would equate to our theory. Many ancient scholars saw no connection between the Dome of the Rock and the Jewish temple location. This theory did not come along until some Christians assumed that must be what happened. Not Jews, it was the Christians who came up with this idea. This was stated by Photius, Photius, around 867 AD. The idea took root, and it was assumed to be true. And then later on, it was picked up by everybody. The Jewish people said that must be it. More later, Muslim documents said that must be it. So it started just from someone's assumption. There is no historical documents that say they built the Dome of the Rock over the Jewish temple. So that alone should give us enough to question whether or not the Dome of the Rock really is where the new temple needs to be built. And the ideas that I have presented to you should make you question, is it possible that that threshing floor actually is where the temple sat, the one that is directly in front of the eastern gate, just like the ancient documents said it was? So we're going to talk about the Temple Institute. The Temple Institute is an organization in Israel right now, and their statement on their website says the Institute is dedicated to every aspect of the biblical commandment to build the holy temple of God on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. So for I don't know how many years now, they have been collecting donations and money and raising money, and they have been creating everything they need to go in the third temple according to God's instructions in the Old Testament. They have been training the priest. They have done DNA tests. They know who meets the requirements to be priest in the new temple. They have been creating the golden instruments. Everything they need, they have created. I actually read, and I saved it somewhere, but I can't find it. Like the doors of the temple, they are already made and in storage, waiting for the walls to go up. Like large parts of the temple are already made and ready to put in place once those walls go up. They already have the architectural plans. You can watch a short video. I'll see if I can find a link to that and put it in the description as well, where you can actually see what the new temple is going to look like. And my next question is, should Christians support and encourage this new temple? Well, first I want to say that I have heard a lot of people say that this is the temple of the Antichrist, and that's ridiculous. The other temple that was desecrated was not called the temple of whoever I think it was Antiochus Epiphanes. It was still God's temple, but it was desecrated by an evil man. And the Jewish people, whose eyes are blinded by God, have been praying for this for since AD 70, almost 2,000 years. And even though most of Israel is, I don't know what the percentage is now, I'm not sure. It's changing on a daily basis, especially since October the 7th. A lot of them are secular. They don't care about the temple. But every time there's another survey, that number goes higher and higher. But there are many religious Jews, many religious people in Israel who want a temple, who want to live for the God of Israel and are looking for the Messiah. Now, we know the Messiah has already come, but they don't, and they want God back in their land. They want God to reside there in the temple. So it is, I believe it's a mistake on our part to condemn them for wanting a temple. And I also believe it is a mistake to call it a temple of the Antichrist. That's ridiculous. There are numerous places in the Bible, and I didn't pull those scriptures, where it's called God's temple. It is God's temple. It is a temple built unto God. Now, we know his presence will not live there until, the last days are over and judgment and all of that stuff. But there will also be a temple in the millennial reign, and there will be sacrifices, and there will be Jewish feast. Now, I believe from what I've read, there would just be some sacrifices, but there's going to be lots of people. It's not just the millennial reign is not just going to be believers in the Messiah. It's going to be all the people who survived the Antichrist and the terrible days of tribulation and God's wrath. So anyway, that's another video. But I believe that there's nothing wrong with us supporting Israel and encouraging Israel, and that we should not say that this future temple is anything evil, because it is not. And so that's all I have on that. I'm going to put some links in the description below, and I want you to look at this. It is a book. It was written by a mathematical engineer who is a Christian, and he researched this for 10 years and then finally wrote a book on it. You can buy the book on Amazon, but you can get it for free. He is not trying to make money off of this. He just wants to make it available. And actually, one thing, like I said, he's a mathematician. He calculated out the chance of the threshing floor accidentally being placed exactly in front of the eastern gate, and it's like a 1% chance that it could have been an accident. So there's a 99% chance that threshing floor and the eastern gate line up on purpose. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, but I highly recommend reading the book. I will paste a link in the description below of the PDF file of the book, and it's got pictures in there of the threshing floor and the oldest parts of the eastern gate and all kinds of things. And it's very fascinating reading. So, considering all the things that are going on in the world and all the peace agreements that are happening and everything else, it's highly plausible that we're going to hear a lot of talk about the third temple. And this is a theory that I would like for you to consider. Thank you for watching. I love you. I'm back. I forgot to tell you something. Well, when I was talking about everything being ready for the temple, the red heifer ashes are ready. I'm sure if you all have been watching, you know that a guy in Texas had been trying to raise the red heifers that could be used for the temple. And he took, I think, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or about the time of October 7th, he took those red heifers to Israel and they qualify. So, right before October the 7th hit, they had planned to sacrifice a red heifer at the following Passover. And when Hamas attacked, they declared that the reason they attacked was because of the red heifers. And it was called the Al-Aqsa flood. So the Al-Aqsa place of worship is on the Temple Mount. And that's what Hamas named the October 7th attack, the Al-Aqsa flood. And they said to a media that it was because of the red heifers. So they knew that as soon as those red heifers, they have those ashes, that they're going to want to build the temple. So that is part of the reason for October the 7th. And the guy from Texas who did this, who raised these red heifers, I follow him on Facebook. His name is Byron Stinson, and I'll get a link in the description below. And he also said, even after that, they canceled the sacrifice at Passover because of October 7th and because of all the media attention. So what they did just this past year is they said they were going to do a practice run and do a practice run of the sacrifice. And now he is saying, and other people are, that it wasn't a practice, it was one of the red heifers, and they have the ashes. So, if that is true, the only other thing that they would not have would be the Ark of the Covenant. And I believe they know where the Ark of the Covenant is. And one option would be a thing called the Copper Scroll. I don't know if you have heard of the Copper Scroll. I'll also place a link to that in the bottom. There was a guy from America who was fascinated with the Copper Scroll. And his line of work, I don't remember what it was, but he decoded things. And so he wanted a chance to decode the Copper Scroll. Nobody could read it. They didn't know what it said. And he broke the code. And it was a treasure map to temple treasures. And he followed the map. He got permission from, and he went to the place where it sounded like to him it was according to the code, and it was at Qumran. And he got in contact with Israeli officials. One of them went out there with him. They followed all of the instructions, so many steps, this direction, and something like that. And then they used radar things, and they could tell that, like, there was gold and silver under there. But then all of a sudden, the state of Israel stopped it all. No digging, no anything. He was cut off, no more. And that is most likely because, and this is what the Israeli official told him, it's because they don't completely own Qumran, that they would have to fight with the Arab countries over anything that they dug up, and they don't want to turn loose of these temple treasures. So it is all very fascinating, and I believe a possibility. So I will provide a link for that as well. So I have a whole list of links to put at the bottom, so you have lots of research to do. And this is a fascinating topic. And thanks again. I'm really done this time. Bye-bye.